Yes, as you can tell, I'm not Mark. Mark's not here. And yes, I'm not really going to apologize for my appearance. This is No Shave November, and my students in my classroom kind of dared me not to shave for the entire month. So far, I made it. Although I don't know how much more further I want to go, because it's starting to get on my nerves. Now, if I was to ask, really, Philip? Help me out here. Now, we live in a very small community, and we know maybe some people vie for their professions. For instance, I'm just going to point out, Janie, you're known as the lunch lady. When I say Janie, people are like, who? I'm like, you know, the lunch lady. Oh, Janie Collins. You know, if I was to say Jeff, the ag teacher, they may say, oh, you mean Jeff Miller. For instance, we could say, I see Penny back there, she's the beautician. A lot of us probably don't mind being identified with our occupation. Like we could say Mark the preacher, David the farmer, and the list can go on and on and on. But what happens if your profession is not desirable? Mark's been talking about this, what the world needs. And today I'm going to talk about what I think the world needs are more Rahabs. When I say the name Rahab, what comes to your mind? Prostitute. What else? Anything else? I mean, the Bible calls her the harlot. Now, you might be saying, okay, you're sitting up here saying the world needs more prostitutes. No, that's not what I'm meaning here. Because Rahab's story is deeper than just that. I mean, how many of us would want to name our daughter Rahab in today's society? But we're going to go kind of talk about her real quick. And if you would, quickly turn to Hebrews chapter 11. Now, I want to let you know, even though she was a harlot, she was a prostitute, she does find her place in Hebrews chapter 11, because Hebrews chapter 11 is known as the Hall of Fame for faith. It's called the faith chapter. I mean, in the new NIV, it starts off by faith. It says, now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out what was visible. Now, you might be saying, if you turn real quickly to verse 31. Because from here on, it lists people, it lists like by faith Noah, by faith Abraham. Then it gets to 31. It says, by faith the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. Rahab was a harlot, but she's found herself in the place of the faith chapter. And if you read through that chapter, these are people of great faith. Great Old Bible people. I mean, he talks about Noah, Abraham. I mean, when you think about it, you think of godly people here. But in verse 31, Rahab is mentioned. She did not have a desirable occupation, but God used her in a miraculous way. People say there are several different types of faith. One, I would say faith that receives. And that is when we reach out to accept God's free gift. That's what we call, that's our faith of receiving. Then we can say there is faith that rests. Like if you're going through a trouble or a trial, you're doing pain, you're hurting, we all have that peace of mind. That faith that God is going to get us through that. That's why I call that the faith of rest. And then there's another type of faith, and that's the faith that risks. And that is the faith that moves out when it's dangerous. It's stepping out on a limb. It's going against what you all know. It's taking that step of faith. And that is the faith that is of risk. And that's what Rahab exhibits. She had a faith that was risky. How many of us are willing to step out on our faith? How many of us are willing to step out on faith against the culture that we live in? When we evaluate ourselves, it's scary. It's uncomfortable. We wouldn't want to do it, but you know what? Rahab had that kind of faith. So now let's talk about the story of Rahab real quick. If you turn over to Joshua chapter 2. If you're reading, this is where I think the Old Testament really starts catching your interest, is in the book of Joshua. Now, before we start reading in Joshua about Rahab, you've got to understand, God's people, the Israelites, were in Egypt. They were under bondage. Moses comes around, frees them, takes them out of bondage. God promised them the promised land. All they have to do is go to it. Well, you got to understand that the people of Israel, how many years did they wander around? 40. They wandered around the wilderness for 40 years. God then led them through the Jordan River. He led them to the threshold of the promised land. They could see it. They were almost there. But in order to claim that land, they had to first conquer the city of Jericho. And Jericho stood at the entrance of the promised land. Now, Mark had talked about Jericho in a previous sermon about, the walls were fortified. I mean, it was a big task. And we know Joshua does conquer Jericho. It's also mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 30, right before Rahab. In that faith chapter, it says, by faith, Joshua, conquered Jericho. I mean, it's right there. But we've got to understand that faith was not only exhibited on the outside of the walls, there was faith exhibited on the inside of the walls of Jericho. And that faith that was exhibited on the inside was Rahab. And that's where we're going to pick up. Let's look at, starting with verse 1. It says, then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies for Shittim, going over to the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. It's kind of ironic, if you look back in the previous chapters, in the previous books, that Joshua only sent 2 spies. Because when Moses got there, does anyone know how many spies Moses sent? He sent 12 into the promised land. Joshua only sent 2. And I have maybe a reason for doing this. Because if you know anything about Moses, he sent out the 12, and Joshua was one of the 12 to the promised land. They all come back to Moses. 10 of them had a negative report. 10 of them said, you know what? We can't conquer this land. There are giants here. We're totally outnumbered. We're totally outmanned. We just can't do it. 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, came back with a good report by saying, it's ours. We can do it. So my logic is, Joshua probably decided, you know what? I'm only going to send out 2 that I know that are like me, that are going to come back with a good report. He basically cut out the negative. Because Moses, sent 12, 10 came back negative, so guess what Moses thought? Negative. So Joshua probably thought, I'm going to send out 2 positive people and let them scout out for us. And verse 1 tells us that they went to the house of Rahab. Now you might be saying, why would these people go there to begin with? Well, going back here and do some research online, I found out that Rahab's house Yes, she was a harlot, but it was also probably used as an inn, as a hotel. So it would have been perfectly okay for these spies to go in to seek shelter, seek refuge. They weren't going there for her occupation. They were just there going for safety. And we read on, it says, verse 2 says, the king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent his message to Rahab, bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. Now we've got to understand, Joshua sent spies into it. How in the world did the king know that the spies were there? So Jericho must have had a pretty good surveillance system going on. Because as soon as they entered, the king knew that this were the spies were. They knew they were in the house of Rahab. Verse 4, it says, but the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. She said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, the men left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them. But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax that she had laid on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Right there, people have a hard time with Rahab. Not only due to the fact that she was a harlot, but the fact that, what'd she do? The king's men came to her house, knocked on her door, and said, okay, where's the spies? We know they're here. And what does Rahab do? She lies. She lied to them. A lot of people are saying, well, now wait a minute. How can this harlot, this liar, be included in the Hall of Fame? Well, yes, lying is bad, but let's talk about, I'm going to give you 5 reasons, because a lot of people have a hard time with her lie. 1, her lie was okay because life is precious. Like she knew that if she didn't lie, those spies would be put to death. So she lied to protect them, to keep them alive. Her lie was okay because this was a time of war. Because the city of Jericho knew Israel was there to conquer them. Much like if you go back and read World War II, what did the Dutch do with the Jews that were in their houses? When the Nazis would come on the door, what would they tell them? There are no Jews here. Even though they were keeping them. Some people might say her lie was not okay, but it was the lesser of 2 evils. If she told the truth, the spies would be caught, captured, and killed. Or she lied, and they get to live. So she went with the lesser of 2 evils, maybe. Another reason, maybe she didn't know any better. I mean, let's stop thinking about it. Rahab lived in Jericho. Jericho was a pagan society. They didn't believe in our God. They had their own ways. So maybe she didn't think anything was wrong with the whole lying thing. But one thing I want you to understand, the lie, to me, is not really the issue here. The reason why, if you go back through and really read the faith chapter, I'm going to tell you right now, everyone that's mentioned in the faith chapter was a sinner. Every last one of them. So to me, her lying, we're all sinners, guys. God transformed her. So I would say right now, the lie to me wasn't an issue because you know what? We all fall short of the kingdom of God. It was through Christ that He was able to bridge that gap for us. And why she's in the faith chapter is due to her faith. There are 3 parts to Rahab's faith I'm going to break down for you. Faith of declaration, faith of demonstration, and faith of deliverance. Here's where I think Rahab's pretty awesome. And this is where I say we need more Rahabs in the world. She lived in Jericho. Jericho was surrounded by a wall, which basically meant she did not know what was probably going on the outside of those walls. She had no clue to what was going on in the rest of the world because she lived inside the city. But yet, she knew about the God of Israel. She knew that God would give Israel the promise, and she knew that. But the question is, how did she know that? This is where I think her profession steps into play here. Travelers probably came into the city. Travelers probably knew of the Israelites' conquest. They probably told stories about how Moses parted the Red Sea, how God delivered them from all these situations. So Rahab learned without actually seeing. The travelers told her what was going on, and it was through that she believed in a God that she'd never seen before. She never witnessed all these wonderful, miraculous things that God was doing for the people of Israel. So what happened was she had already placed her faith in God before the spies even got there. She already knew who her God was before the two spies that Joshua sent there to her. A lot of people think the spies helped her along her journey. I don't think they did. I think in her heart she already knew who God really was. Through faith. Faith is having faith without seeing. To me, she exemplifies that. She trusted, she believed in a God that she never seen. She just had heard about all these stories that he was doing for the people of Israel. And if you look at, starting in chapter verse 8, it says, "Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know," and I want to point out, she says, "I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water in the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. We heard it, our hearts melted, and everyone's courage fell because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death." Verse 9, she says, "I know." She knew before they were even there who the God was. Faith, she also demonstrated faith. In the fact that she took the spies in and hid them. She just demonstrated her faith by her actions. I mean, she could have been locked up, she could have been killed, the king found out. I mean, she would have faced certain death. But she was willing to demonstrate her faith in God by saying, "God, I'll hide your servants." And then she had faith in a God that would deliver her. Because after Rahab helped the spies escape, she placed a red cord down her window as the spies instructed her. Because if you read, they tell her, tie a red string and make sure you have all your family in your house. Because what happens next is the Israel army comes around. We know the story. They march around, 13 times in 7 days. On the last time they marched around, they shouted. And when they shouted, the walls of Jericho fell. They conquered the city. Everyone was killed in Jericho except for Rahab and her family. God spared her because she knew she would be delivered by her faith. Because Mark has been talking about, last week he talked about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They told the king, you know what, my God is able, but if he chooses not to, it's fine. Rahab knew her God was able. She knew that God would deliver her, however he felt she needed to be. Now, to read on, let's turn to Joshua chapter 6, real quick. And find verse 25. It says, "But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua sent as spies to Jericho. And she lives among the Israelites to this day." So once the city fell, guess what? The Israelite people took her in. She became one of them. And here's where I think, this is so totally awesome. Just kind of bear with me real quick. You don't have to turn there real quick. I'm going to turn to Matthew chapter 1. Because this is the genealogy of Jesus. Okay, it says a record of the genealogy of Jesus, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And it lists chapter 2, chapter 3. Chapter 4 says Ram, the father of Aminadab, and Aminadab the father of Nahshon. Nahshon the father of Salmon. Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Guess who's in the genealogy of Christ? Rahab. Even though she's known as the harlot, she was Christ's great, I forget how many great grandmother to Jesus. She was a great grandmother to King David. And if you keep on looking, God blessed Rahab because of her faith. Because Nahshon, who was her husband, was Rahab's father-in-law. And if you read Numbers 7, 12, I know, Randy, have you got there yet? Numbers 7, 12 yet?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to refresh your memory. It tells us that Nahshon was one of 12 princes that made an offering in the tabernacle. He was a prince of Judah. So not only when Rahab did what she did, she married a prince of Judah. God blessed her because of her faith. She became royalty. And then later on, blessed the entire line, because that's the line, that's the genealogy that Christ comes from. So a pagan prostitute, she becomes a believer. Then she becomes a wife of a prince. And ultimately she becomes an ancestor to the Messiah himself. How awesome is that? What is awesome, just think of the grace. God's grace. Now, to wrap everything up, a lot of us think that God can't do this. That's what I'm saying. When I say the world needs more Rahabs, it's the fact that too many Christians out there think God can't use me. They think they're not talented enough. They think we may not be spiritual enough. We have all these roadblocks that we set up in front of us on reasons why we aren't, on the reasons why we can't. But I want to tell you right now, Rahab's story shows us that God can use anyone. It doesn't matter how talented you are. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter your limitations. If you're willing to be used by God, God will use you. That's what Rahab did. She was willing. And since she was willing, God used her. So what we need to do is, we need to do what? We need to all do what Rahab did. And that is exercise a faith that is risky. She stepped out on faith. How many of us are willing to step out on faith as well today? If you are willing to take that step, here's what I want you to do. During this time of invitation, the band will come up. Here's a very simple prayer. Just basically say this. Just say, Lord, here I am. Use me. Now I'm going to be honest. That prayer is scary. Because if you say that prayer, God will use you. It may be uncomfortable. It may be scary. So you got to be very, very serious as we get ready to call of invitation. Do what Rahab did. What this world needs is more of us to say, God, use me. Because if we say that prayer, I think the world would be a much better place, because we have to learn to take that first step, and that is the step of faith. So would you guys please stand with us? And if anyone has any specific needs that need to be met, I myself or Art will be willing to, or Jeff, any of them, us will be willing to pray with you, because right now we realize there's a lot going on. A lot of different needs that are out there, but it's by faith that God will deliver us from them. just by a show of hands, are willing to take the step that Rahab did. She basically said, God, use me. Here I am, Lord, just use me. If you would, that's what we need to be doing, guys. Be willing to be used. And God will use us. Please bow your head. Our dear Heavenly Lord, we come before you, Lord, with so much gratitude and so much love for you. I mean, you sent your one and only Son for us. Lord, and we're all here, Lord, and the ones that at the show of hands, we're saying, here, Lord, here we are. Use us. And Lord, just give us the strength, because we know that is a very powerful, very scary prayer that we are now praying, Lord. Just give us the strength and reassurance to do your will. Let us have the faith of Rahab, Lord. Let us be willing to take that risky step. Ask all this in Son's holy name.